if I honor the Bible as a source of divine wisdom, I have to reckon with the fact that this extraordinary emphasis on the poor living conditions of people in poverty or people of the vulnerable, people who are vulnerable, and that their problems need to become the problems of those with influence and resources and voice.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of a just community.
Yeah.
That just is the case. And I can choose to say, I hear that that's what the Bible's saying. I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think there's a different way. So that's fine. But I think at least what we're not doing anybody any favors is by saying, well, that's not actually what the Bible's saying.
You're saying that the Bible is saying that justice is actually identifying the people who are marginalized and vulnerable and making sure that there are systems in place that give them a leg up.
Yep.
Like that's the biblical view of justice.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to say we're trying to be faithful to the Bible and its wisdom about justice, I don't know.
It just becomes very clear.
Yeah, it's just, you just read it. Well, it can be easily misunderstood. Here's a good example. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a really influential theologian from Peru. He was Peruvian. He was a Catholic priest. And his name was Gustavo Gutierrez. And he just started writing like a madman because he grew up in poor, slum in Peru. But he was able to find his way forward through education and then in ministry in the Catholic Church. And so he just started writing. His most famous book was called The Theology of Liberation. And he ended up sparking a movement, a theological movement of authors and
Liberation theology.
Liberation theology. And it was encapsulated by this phrase that he coined called, if you look at the God of the Bible, who reveals himself as the God of the Exodus, and he calls it that God has a preferential option for the poor, which doesn't mean that you disregard fairness in favor of the poor. He's often misunderstood on that point. His point is simply this, that if you look at all of the hundreds of occurrences of mishpat in the Bible, there is 9 out of 10 of them are uniquely focused and aware of the difficult situations of the vulnerable. And if they are left behind in my vision of the future of my community, I cannot claim to be a just community. That just is the case. And it's through from the Torah to the prophets, and as we'll talk about right on into the New Testament as well. It's just, so how that translates into specific policies and legislation.
Yeah, you
and
said
programs.
It could go too far. What were you about to
Well,
say?
I mean, this is what people debate about. So I think there is lots of room for debate. You just have to be an expert, I think, on the policy of whatever matter it is at hand, education or healthcare. I think at least we should be clear. If I'm claiming to be a religious person who bases my view of the world on the Bible, my vision of the just society has to be informed by this. So this is what I'm hoping the contribution the video can make, is to at least say, this is what the Bible means front to back about justice. And my hunch is that on like a healthcare debate, I mean, I actually don't understand the details. I try to, but it's really complicated. But my hunch is there are probably religious people on both sides of that debate who have read their Bibles and they really believe what they're doing is faithful, even though they come to different points of view. And I don't know what to do with that. But it's an exercise everybody has to go through, I think, if you find yourself called into these kinds of roles.